Hey, good morning, Grace Christian School. It's great to see you, and I'm so excited to be bringing you this presentation today using a selfie stick. That's right, my coolness extends that far where I can present to you with a selfie stick. We're finishing up chapter 32, section 5 today. We're looking at the last part of these notes dealing with the Potsdam Conference, and there are three characters you need to know. There is who? Mr. Winston Churchill, Mr. Harry Truman, and Joseph Stalin. These three gentlemen get together at Potsdam to do what we call the Potsdam Conference to, in a sense, handle the question, what do we do with post-World War Germany, and how do we make that work? One of the big interesting things about this conference was that they determined that they would divide up Germany into each of those areas. You can see the different areas, the different regions with which Germany is divided up. Yes, I know second hour, we covered this today or yesterday, but just realized we have regional zones. Each zone is controlled by a general, a World War II general put in charge of those areas. Now, after World War II, as you probably can imagine, one of the main agendas in Germany, at least, was to crush the Nazi Party. What we want to see is a destruction or an end of the Nazi Party. We want to reestablish some sort of a local government so that this stuff doesn't happen again. Remember, after World War I, we just said, we want you to suffer and be punished. But now after World War II, we are smarter, learning from history, and we're saying that we want to make a difference in how we approach this. We want to come beside and we want to partner with Germany and help rebuild them. One of the cool things you're going to learn about, we're going to look ahead to, is in chapter 33, the airdrop, the Berlin airdrop. We support Germany. We drop in planes after planes of supplies when the Soviet Union tries to keep us out of portions of Berlin. And so look ahead in chapter 33 for that moment. Couple other thoughts here, a couple other things in the Potsdam Conference. We looked ahead to Japan. What do we do with Japan, and what do we do in Japan itself? Now, the big figure you need to really know is Douglas MacArthur. Douglas MacArthur comes into Japan, and he sets up a new government, post-World War government. He takes tons of Japanese soldiers and finds work for them and puts them into productive business. And so they're no longer sitting around. Douglas MacArthur, as a general, comes in and he sets Japan on track to recover after the war. One of the other really important things to know, of course, World War II in Japan would not have ended if it wasn't for Hirohito here. Hirohito, the emperor, was willing to step aside and was willing to say, relax, surrender, we surrender. And so that was a big part of this. General Douglas MacArthur, one of the things that I want you to know is in Japan, MacArthur sets up the Constitution, he sets up the government, and he does all sorts of things. There is the always majestic and noble MacArthur. Again, he would probably use a selfie stick if he could, because he is kind of that way. He is into himself just a little bit. He does lots of things, though, that are really important. He set up a democratic system of government in Japan, which they still hold today, and they set up a constitution, which, guess what? Looks like ours. And so they set up this constitution we would call today still the MacArthur Constitution, because it so much resembles the American Constitution. Kind of the wrap up, the last couple things are what to do with the war crimes and the trials of the Germans and the Japanese. And we set up a series of military tribunals or court cases. One of them is called the Nuremberg trials, and that's where we'll go to next. The Nuremberg trials deal with the prisoners, or the criminals of war, rather, who treated many of the prisoners of war very poorly. And that's one of the things that we want to take away from this, is the poor treatment of the people in charge. How they broke typical convention, they broke military expectations and what would be considered normal military treatment, and they violated them. And so they were held accountable for their actions, for their acts and their roles in the Holocaust. Now, of course, what happened to Adolf Hitler? We know. All right, he is no longer there, of course, and either are several of the top officials in Germany. Some have run, but the ones they could capture, they hold right here, and they have a series of judges who come in. There's over 23 nations involved, and all sorts of testimony and opportunity for people to come and testify about their experiences. At the end of the day, again, America had a voice at this. We were one of the 23 countries there. We had a Supreme Court judge sitting there monitoring the trials. And as a result of this, over 12 were sentenced to death. 12 were sentenced to death. 7 received jail sentences, and 3, they just didn't have enough information and were acquitted. Other trials in Germany, thousands of different Nazi leaders were fined, were jailed. And one of probably the most important things here is, let me get close, they were barred from public office. We don't want them to be a part of any government again that they might influence or unduly influence and lead to future problems. Some of them, like Adolf Eichmann, famous Nazi leader, architect of the extermination program, the pogrom, to kill the Jews. He hid and was later captured, but captured in Mexico, but hid and tried to not face justice for his crimes. Over in Japan, they also had military trials in Japan, and over 1,100 Japanese were imprisoned and arrested and put on trial. 7, including the mastermind behind the Pearl Harbor attacks, Tojo, were sentenced to death. Well, what do we know about these war trials? They set a precedent for future war trials, which we see in the world history today. We see that now the world will hold you accountable. Saddam Hussein is a great example of someone who's been held accountable for their actions and for atrocities committed. Osama bin Laden, had he been captured, he would have faced war crimes and in a trial. And so this is the issue: is what do we do with people we capture today who've broken our public trust, our public